Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you very, very much for being here. I welcome you to the fourth annual Aspen Brain Lab. I'm very proud to be presenting Aspen Brain Lab, as unraveling the mysteries of the brain is now a global priority. It's a U.S. priority and a global priority. And thank you all for being interested in this, and for the speakers, wonderful speakers who are coming to tell us all about the mysteries of the brain. And all of us, I know some of you have been here many times, and I think we are a growing community of 21st century global seekers. And what we love to do, we love to be delighted and informed at the cutting edge. And I hope that's what we're going to provide for you today. Joseph, would you get me a glass of water and then I'll introduce you. I want to say a few thank yous, and one is to my colleague, Joseph Dial, who's acting as my helper for just the moment. Joseph is the chair of the Scientific Advisory Board of the Aspen Brain Forum, which is our parent company. Joseph and I produce one scientific and technical conference a year with the New York Academy of Sciences in New York, now celebrating their 200th year anniversary, where Darwin and Einstein were members. And we're very proud to have them as our strategic partner. So in terms of Joseph, excuse me, I know about 1/3 of the great neuroscientists in the world, and Joseph knows the other 2/3. And his great skill is that he can talk neuroscience and party at the same time. So he's extremely valuable, and you'll hear more from Joseph in a little bit. Next, a big thank you to Shanta Heath, who is at the back of the room, our project manager for Aspen Brain Lab. Thanks, Shanta, for doing so many things so well. I also want to thank Carol Lee, Friedlander, and Lynn, founders of the Access Circles, who have brought 60 dynamic women and other doctors and speakers to us today from all over the country, and possibly some from South Africa, as they usually do. So thank you very much for supporting us for all these years, Carolee and Lynn. I also want to thank the University of Pittsburgh Brain Institute for being our sponsor and for bringing a wonderful speaker to us on Alzheimer's, and for having a very intriguing display table outside in the hall. And we hope to partner with University of Pittsburgh Brain Institute in the future and do some interesting research, perhaps. And thank you to all our presenters who have come from all over. I don't know if Adam Ghazali got here, but he's been traveling for about 24 hours, and he will be here this afternoon. Next, I wanted to tell you about our tiny program books. Have you all got a little tiny program book? We could not fit the lengthy bios that all the speakers sent. They sent us bios that were more like memoirs for their grandchildren. You can find everything about the speakers at aspenbrainlab.com, and you're welcome to open your phones and have a look, but just please keep the ringers off. Thank you very much. One more note, excuse me. We'll have a healthy breakfast brain break at around 10 a.m. You can bring food in here, and you'll just please be mindful of the time, because we'll try to feed several hundred people in a half hour, and so just be mindful of the time. Now, we can get started. We're on a very tight schedule, but I'm so delighted to see all of you here. We're going to start with the creative brain. So as they say about creativity, there's not an app for that. That's a slogan that I've seen. There is a whole science now called the neurobiology of creativity. And dopamine, a brain chemical, is certainly the mother of creative invention, often through sleep and dreaming. But beyond that, I wanted to give you some thoughts about some recent examples of creativity and innovation that maybe will blow your mind. I just saw a 3D report about 3D printing of human facial bones. Those are apparently the hardest things to find and replace, but we can now 3D print human bones. They are now making yarn, knitting yarn, clothing yarn, out of slaughterhouse waste. A Japanese robotic farm is producing 500,000 lettuces a day with just robots. NASA is sending a 3D printer to the International Space Station to build spare parts for what is now called off-world manufacturing. I hope all of you know what that means. I just love all of this. So we're going to start the first section with creative brain, and Dr. John Krakauer, and Joseph will introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenda. Well, she does such a great job of introducing me that I'll just do the 1/3 and she can handle the 2/3. Thank you all for being here. How many people have been with us before? Raise your hand. Oh, that's terrific. Thank you for coming back. And how many are here new with us today? Wow, that's fantastic. Well, get ready to rock and roll. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy, brainy day. And I want to just get us started off with Dr. John Krakauer. A couple of things. This year, we're videotaping and live streaming. So powers greater than I have determined that the Q&A will happen during the breaks. So we won't have Q&A after the presentations. And I wanted to admonish our speakers that these stairs are a little slippery, so be careful as you come up. And now, Dr. John Krakauer from Johns Hopkins. And as Glenda said, everyone has a very lengthy resume. So I will just tell you that he's going to talk to you about dancing with dolphins.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm not a morning person, so I want to thank Glenda for inviting me. This is my first time here, and also for Access Circles, Carolee and Lynn for co-hosting me. Okay. So let's get started, because I don't have very long and I have lots to say. All right, I'm going to advance the slides myself. This is where I'm at, Johns Hopkins. This is our website. I always show this. Please follow us on Twitter. That's the most important thing for any neuroscience lab. And you can also find all our publications and, most important, media appearances. Okay, so I'm talking about stroke today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what stroke is, it's when a part of the brain is deprived of blood and oxygen and dies. 800,000 people a year have a stroke in the United States. There's somebody having a stroke every 40 seconds. It is the leading cause of disability. It is by far the leading neurological disorder. And unfortunately, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6 of you in this room will have one. Even though Aspen may, beat those odds with all the healthiness that I've seen around me. It's quite extraordinary. Anyway, the problem is that after stroke, even though there are new ways of treating the clot, and I run the neuro ICU and the stroke unit at Hopkins several weeks of the year, once you've had your stroke, it's the leading cause of disability in the US, and we do not have a good rehabilitative treatment. And the last thing I'd like to say, for the women in the room, twice as many women die of stroke than they do of breast cancer. Okay, so stroke is sort of an absolute epidemic, in a sense, but people don't know that much about it. So these are sort of 10 patients who've had strokes. We now have imaging abilities to sort of identify the stroke very quickly. And these are patients that I actually put in a database when I was at Columbia before I moved to Hopkins. And essentially, these are patients who've all completely paralyzed down the other half of their body. Where it's white is where the stroke is, and everyone here is paralyzed down one half of the body. And the question are two questions. Can you predict the ones who are going to get better? And can you do anything to make them get even better, or do something about the ones who we predict will not get better? Okay, and it's a big problem. Now, unfortunately, in the US and in other countries, after you've had your stroke, and for reasons which will become readily apparent in a moment, what we do is we put people in hospital rooms in the first 2 to 3 weeks where they're alone 85% of the time, and alone 60% of the time, and immobile 85% of the time. So you sit in your luxurious room watching the Weather Channel, basically squandering a unique period of plasticity, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So in other words, for all of you see these gleaming hospitals and the names on their plaques, unfortunately, the rehab that you will get after your brain injury, whether it's TBI or stroke, is medieval. Okay. Now, we published a mathematical relationship. You don't need to know too much about this. A number of years ago, it's been reproduced several times. The only point I want to sort of make about this is that there is a predictable relationship between how much you will recover from your brain injury in the vast majority of patients, except the ones who have severe injury. And the main point is that this mathematical relationship actually implies that what we do for a patient when they're in their hospital after stroke has no impact whatsoever. That there's an endogenous process doing all the work, and we're basically standing by and watching. And just so you understand, what rehabilitation today does, with an average length of stay of about 12 days, it shrinks every year because of economic considerations, is to teach you to cope with what you have left. It's not trying to repair what's been damaged, it's saying we'll teach you to use a walker, to transfer out of bed, all very commendable things, but they're not repair, they're coping. Okay, whereas this relationship that I'm showing you is a repair relationship that's going on in the background, and what we need to do is to learn how to piggyback on top of the repair process rather than just focusing on coping. So I'm just going to show you, we do at Hopkins and at other places a sort of quantitation of movement. This is one way we do it. People sit at a table and they have an air sled and they make reaching movements like around a clock, like this, so all of you would make nice straight arm movements. This is just a way to quantify movement without you being able to cheat with respect to compensating. You can't move your trunk, you can't find another way to get the task done. This is really probing how well you can move. Okay, and the one thing I want to tell you is if you use this kind of quantitation of movement and you track people over a year after stroke, and you find a way to mathematically sort of describe these trajectories. So basically, this is what people after a stroke look like, even with gravity removed and friction. They still have an enormously difficult time making accurate movements. And of course, the million-dollar question is, how do you get from here back to there? Okay? And basically, you can quantify mathematically how far you've moved from this kind of performance back to normality. And basically, this is a graph showing that mathematical relationship, and all you need to see is that any improvement happens from here to here, very little afterwards. It's all over within 4 weeks. So you have about 4 to 5 weeks to actually repair. And remember what I told you, 2 to 3 of those weeks, you're sitting alone 60% of the time, non-moving 85% of the time in this window. So it's being utterly frittered away. Okay? Now, we also look at rodents, and this is not a very good slide, but basically Kolben Weishaw, some scientists in Canada, made a very nice point that reaching in rodents has a lot of similarities to reaches in humans, so we can learn quite a lot from rodents despite the evolutionary distance. This is a little mouse that we've trained, and I bet you didn't know they had such cute little hands. Look at that. So this is a mouse that, doesn't have very good table manners. It would rather use its tongue, but we make it not possible. So it goes, okay, I'll reach then. And then you can train the mouse to be quite accurate. Okay, and it's so cute that we give it a stroke. And this is where you give it a stroke. This is a cross-section of the mouse brain. This is its motor cortex. And basically you can induce a stroke. And then what happens afterwards on this task is you can train the mouse before on reaches. It gets to about 60% accurate reaches, and then it plateaus. You then give it the stroke, and of course, the behavior plummets. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to sort of rehabilitate the little mouse, okay? And we're going to do the same kind of neglect that human beings suffer from currently in US hospitals. So we're going to wait a week, and then we're going to start training it on the task. And as you can see, even 3 weeks of intense training every day, we can't get it back to where it was, okay? What about if we do this again, but we don't wait? We go right away, within a day after the stroke, all right? We're going to guess that in a mouse, that window that I said was about 4 or 5 weeks, in the human might be even shorter. Back to normal, all right? So that means that we are proving that there's a critical period, a sensitive period of enhanced responsiveness to training that we could piggyback on, okay? So basically what we're saying is that if you delay, you don't get as much bang for your buck with training. If you go right away, you get more. We need to do something about this delay. Now, this is the crazy piece. If it's true that stroke induces a time-limited period of sensitivity to injury, then paradoxically that implies that if you've waited too long to be trained intensely after your stroke, then obviously the best way to treat you is to give you another stroke. All right? So that's what we did in the mouse model. We said, let's wait again too long. We train, and basically they're no longer responding to treatment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give them another stroke right next door to the one they've had. And what you'll see is they'll get worse, obviously, because you've given them more stroke. But then you're going to see something quite dramatic. Back to normal. So basically what this second stroke has done has reopened this window of plasticity that closed previously. All right? Now, obviously, at Hopkins, nor anywhere else, I hope, are we going to do this to our patients. I think what we're saying here is that there is a principle that we need to exploit, okay? This is just a control, so you can read about this kind of notion here. I will, in the interest of time, skip it. So the question is, without giving people another stroke, how are we going to exploit this sensitive period? What are we going to do? Now, are there drugs or brain stimulation effects that we can do, or can we enhance with enrichment? I haven't got time today to go over all the ways with drugs, with brain stimulation, what could potentially prolong this window and enhance it. I am going to talk about enrichment. So it turns out that if you take a mouse or a rat and you put it in a very fun environment, in other words, you put it in an environment with its friends, with toys, with challenges, in the absence of task-specific training, they get better. But this is our hospital rooms right now. Right? We are in a cage, basically, a luxurious cage, but it's a cage nevertheless. So the question you should be asking yourself is, how do we do this for humans? What's the human equivalent of enrichment? Because as I said, you've got this window that's closing. All right? These are growth factors that are turned on and then turned off. All right? So what would an enriched environment for patients look like? Well, the answer, we think, was hiding in plain sight, which was animation. Now, I haven't got time to go into the history of Disney and the reasons why it is so pleasurable for us, but the key aspect and what the early animators at Disney in the 1920s realized was that we love to watch bouncy, real movement. What they actually called it the illusion of life. Okay, so we thought, how are we going to sort of exploit this pleasure in watching bouncy, cool movement and bring it into treatment? Now, it also turns out that all of us in this room, and this was a study done by a colleague of mine in England, Daniel Wolpert and his colleagues, they basically showed that all of us live in a statistical cloud of everyday movements that look like these donut elliptical clouds of statistical movements. So all of us are doing this. I'm gesturing right now. You eat with a knife and fork. You're on your computer. So basically, many, many tasks of everyday life live in this statistical cloud. Okay? Now, if you have children, children babble. Right? They're just statistically exploring their environment, and eventually they converge on successful movements. So the idea was, not only are we going to have people sort of be in this Disney, childish, wonderful world, but we're going to try and make them babble as well. Okay. Now, finally, so what we're converging upon is the final piece of the puzzle, which is how are we going to make people babble and be in a sort of Disney-like feeling movement? And this is Omar Marj, who's actually the head of the technology group that is doing what I'm about to show you. And this was us working for a couple of years with dolphins at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. Because what we would argue is dolphins are admired because they are intelligence injected into movement. So what we want to do is to make you feel like you're a dolphin. So this is me in the robot with Bandit, the simulated dolphin that we researched after years with the dolphins at the aquarium. This was actually an article in National Geographic, and people just sort of captures the immersive feel of being in the exoskeletal robot, plus with Bandit the dolphin. And Bandit is a simulation, and with the robot, you actually become the intention of the dolphin, the lights are off, and you begin to actually swim and babble, chasing fish with your arm, not even aware of your own arm. It's no task-specific training. We just want you to live as a dolphin in that statistical cloud of everyday life. This is the team. And, you know, the kind of team that you need, and I think this is a point I'd really like to emphasize, to do this kind of work where you combine robotics, art, animation, gaming, neuroscience, brain stimulation, needs a very unusual conglomeration of nerds, right? So Omar Ahmad worked as a Disney Imagineer. Kat is a full-time animation artist. Pramit was most valued programmer for 3 years at Microsoft. And Kevin Olds got his PhD in robotics at Hopkins and then joined us. Now, this is a very unusual kind of team, and medical schools are going to have to change in terms of accommodating these kind of people rather than having them disappear off to Silicon Valley to make the iPhone 9 or whatever it is. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you a video to finish of what this experience is like, and then we'll stop. Could we play and the first one's presentation. And maybe you could have the lights down a little bit and turn on the sound. No, it's that one. It's right there. No, the one behind it. Just click on the, you don't have to reduce anything. Okay, and press play. Play there. And can you fill the whole screen? So this is what the patients see in the trial that we're currently doing. This is the robot. So currently patients are enrolled within 5 weeks of their stroke in that window, and they spend 3 weeks being a dolphin twice a day. It's incredibly intense. This is not an animation, it's a simulated dolphin. So first you have to, this is a graduate student demonstrating, and you have to chase fish. And then it gets harder. The sharks can eat you too. This is actually a patient playing in this particular video. So I'll stop there, and the trial is ongoing. Thank you very much.
Hi. Bill, is this on now? That was incredibly creative in a way that maybe none of us expected. Excuse me. We're going to see a video in just a minute. The incredible future of virtual reality devices is not in video games or movies, perhaps. It's in medicine, and especially in brain surgery. Our next video features Dr. Neil Martin demonstrating his brain surgery using a 360-degree virtual reality camera, which can see inside the brain in a way that we've never been able to do. Let's watch. Bill?
I'm going to meet with Dr. Neil Martin, the chief neurosurgeon at the UCLA Medical Center, who's using virtual reality headsets to improve the way he does brain surgery. Dr. Martin and his team are working with a technology developed by a company called Surgical Theater, which uses VR headsets to allow surgeons to step inside their patients' brains before they operate on them. I'm interested to see, how much utility VR has in a very practical life or death situation. So here you're demonstrating the VR technology, and this is an actual patient, right?
Yes, this is one of our patients who had a brain tumor at the base of the skull. So this one was almost halfway between my fingers, just behind the right eye. We have two goals during a complex operation. Take care of the abnormality, remove a tumor, save all the normal structures, the nerves, the blood vessels, the brain tissue itself. I'm going to put the headset on, and I'll be...
The VR brain model is made by taking standard 2D MRI scans of the brain and stacking them to form a three-dimensional model.
Virtual reality gives you that understanding of your entire 180 or even 360-degree anatomy that is impossible to get with any other technique. In 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I can see the critical issues that I've got in mind that have to be dealt with. And historically, this took 10 or 20 years of experience to turn two-dimensional black and white x-rays into a three-dimensional mental image. And I can now fly into the skull. We're going to fly past all the blood vessels here. So I'm over on the opposite side of the head. And then if I turn around 180 degrees, I'm looking at the backside of the tumor.
Which is something you would never be able to do otherwise.
So this is impossible during surgery because you'd have to remove the entire brain to get that perspective. I can walk around it and really get a fantastic feel, a real feel for exactly where the structures are.
And now you actually did this surgery already, right?
We would call this a complete resection, a complete removal of the tumor.
That's amazing.
At the turn of the century, mortality rate for brain tumor surgery was about 19%, 1 person out of 5.
So are you creating this 3D model for every time I get a new scan?
We'll be doing images in the future to make sure that we see no sign of any tumor growing back. Over the last 12 months, we haven't had any mortality in hundreds of cases. Our mortality rate isn't 0, but it's under 1% for patients who are not in a dire crisis. We're really striving for perfection in every operation. So the goal is have them survive, lose no neurologic function, be back at work in a month, and have no cosmetic evidence that they ever had surgery in the first place.
That's incredible.
Now, the structures that are engulfed...
I think historically, we've been led to believe that virtual reality is a fad. It's come in waves, but I don't think the technology was there yet when everybody got so excited about it. But I think VR is doing what we expected it to do all along, and it's just getting more and more impressive.
I can see a time when we're looking at the surface of the brain, but we'll virtually have 3D X-ray vision. We'll be able to see a tumor under the surface and have great confidence during the operation.
This isn't what's coming. This is here now, and it's only going to get better.
That was fantastic, and that's real. We're starting the next video, which is Dr. Uzma Samadani. This is more news on the creative brain. Dr. Samadani has created a new handheld diagnostic tool for concussion. And there are a few people here who have had some concussions and know what the real dangers are of not being able to diagnose a concussion right away. And this wonderful young woman, doctor, has created an eye movement tracking device that can tell right away whether there's a concussion. And she says concussion does not have to be invisible. Let's watch.
That's right. Follow my finger. This is the current state-of-the-art diagnostic for brain injury. It's a gigantic problem. Every 8 seconds, somebody in the US gets a serious blow to the head from a fall, collision, or accident, and we can't even tell how badly they're hurt. Sometimes we can't even tell if they're hurt at all, not even with our best technology. We use CT and MRI scans, but concussion does not generally show up on these. The brain appears normal, even though it doesn't function normally. Even when we know someone has a brain injury, it can be very difficult to tell if they're getting better or getting worse over time. As someone who's run clinical trials for brain injury, I've been wrestling with this problem for years. We need outcome measures. A few years ago, we were trying to figure out how we could quantify if severely injured vegetative patients were getting better or not. A collaborator said to me, "Why don't you try tracking their eye movements?" We had this idea that less injured people would be able to watch television, while more severely injured patients would just stare into space. So we wrote computer software that tracks a viewer's pupils as they follow action on a screen. Looks familiar. We set up an eye tracking camera and started recording people's eye movements while they watched a music video by Shakira, because her hips don't lie. We tracked normal, healthy controls and compared them to my neurosurgery patients. The software measured how well their eyes followed action on the screen and whether their pupils were able to converge on a focal point as that point moved. If one eye lagged behind the other, even for just a fraction of a second, we would be able to detect that. I remember what happened next as if it were yesterday. My postdoc walked in and she handed me a stack of data. I settled down to start to look through the results. As I looked through the pages, all of a sudden it hit me. It was in the data. It was clear that normal, healthy people were moving their eyes in a way very, very different than people who had swelling in their brains. In fact, in many patients, eye movement abnormalities actually revealed where in the brain the injury might have occurred. Their eyes told the story. For doctors who treat brain injury, this might be a quantum leap. We don't have to guess anymore. Concussion does not have to be invisible. We can detect it, we can measure it, we can quantitate it as it gets better or worse. We might even be able to locate it. We can do this in a 2-year-old, we can do this in a 92-year-old. They can speak any language or have any level of literacy. With eye movement tracking, it's virtually impossible for someone to fake wellness, disease, or premature recovery. We've started a company to commercialize this technology and make it mainstream, affordable, and accessible to absolutely everyone. Millions of times a year, when people are wheeled into an emergency room, we want to be able to give them a fast, accurate diagnosis. Do they have a brain injury? How bad is it? Where is it? When something is invisible, you can't run clinical trials. You can't test whether something prevents it. You can't test whether something treats it. But when it's not invisible, imagine what you can do. You can improve quality of life, and you can save lives. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but perhaps how the eyes move are a window to the brain.
Thank you, Glenda, for those 2 terrific videos. And now we'll have Dr. Beau, who is the founder of Ripple and the Lab of Misfits. He's going to take you on a magical mystery tour of the brain and tell you about ways that deviate that are good. Beau?
Good morning, everybody. Can we hear me with this? Yes? Okay, brilliant. So, how many of you woke up this morning thinking that you saw the world as it really is? Thank goodness, the organizers, right? Anyone else seeing the world as it really is? A few? Okay, if you're not seeing the world as it really is, what are you seeing? Right? A fundamental question. Does the brain do accuracy? Right? So let's do a quick test to see how accurate you are at seeing the world as it really is. How many can see the predator that's about to jump out at you? And if you haven't seen it yet, you're dead. Right? Not at the back, just here. Right? Can anyone see it? 90% of the information your brain uses to see comes from lightness. It's staring right at you. Who thinks they can see it? Where do you think it is?
In the center.
In the center?
Yeah.
Okay, you're dead.
It's in the lower right-hand corner.
The lower right-hand corner. Let's add 10% of the information. Yes? So if I go back, you can see it was always staring at you, right? Well, this is a fairly complex scene. What about lightness, right? The simplest perception your brain has is perceiving the intensity of light, right? Surely at this level, we see the world accurately. So things that are the same should always look the same. Things that are different should look different. These two circles, intensity-wise, are exactly the same. But what happens if we don't change them? We just change what surrounds them. Do they still look the same? This one, for most, probably looks lighter than that one. Yes? If it doesn't, see me after. Okay? So this demonstrates a fundamental point. This is called simultaneous brightness contrast. We don't know how it works. But what it demonstrates is that when it comes to perception, even to the fundamental level, and remember, perception underpins everything you think, you know, you believe, the clothes you wear, the people you fall in love with, everything begins with perception. And fundamental to perception is that context is everything. Your brain did not evolve to see absolutes. It evolved to see relationships. Why? And the reason is because data is meaningless. Information is meaningless. This is true even at the level of your senses. Your brain has no access to the physical world. So the information that your senses receive conflate multiple things about the world. Size and distance. Something that's large and far away projects exactly the same as something small and up close. And your brain has no way of knowing from the information itself. So information is meaningless because it could mean anything. So how does your brain deal with this fundamental nature of uncertainty? In fact, this is the problem that your brain evolved to solve, which is uncertainty. And not just your brain, every living system is dealing with uncertainty, right? And the way it does it is by continually redefining normality. Your brain evolved to evolve. It's adapted to adapt, okay? And as we heard from the first speaker, my lab at one point was studying growth factors. And what we discovered, among other labs, is that the amount of growth factors that your brain releases is directly related to activity. The more active your brain, the more you have growth factors. The more complex are the brain cells, in this case in the cortex. These were experiments done by Marion Diamond, absolutely wonderful woman from Berkeley. If you don't know her, you should. And this is from the same area of the cortex from rats raised in a deprived environment. Okay? So I want to show you how quickly your brain can redefine normality by just using color. And I want you to know that these two desert scenes are the same, just one is just the inversion of the other. And I want you to stare at this dot between the red and the green. Don't look anywhere else. Right? Your brain is learning. It's redefining normality. It's learning that the left side of its visual field is under green light and the right side is under red light. That's becoming its new reality. Which means everything you see after this will be a function of that recent history. You're also getting very sleepy. Right? Keep looking. Don't look anywhere else. Right? When I tell you to, I'm going to ask you to look at the dot between the desert scenes, but not yet. Okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Look there. They look the same? No? For 7% of the men, they will, because you're colorblind? Okay? And as you start looking around, your brain again will redefine normality. And we're just talking about color, right? The simplest perception. So what do you see when you look out into the world? You don't see the world because you can't. It's forever impossible to see the world. Nor do you see the data arising from that world because it's meaningless. Instead, your brain evolved to see a meaning that was useful to see in the past. What's more, you don't see a history of what something turned out to be. You see a history of your past perceptions. Okay? So what does it mean to see meaning? We're going to use a very obvious example, language. And I want you to read in the next few sentences. I want you to read what you see in the next few slides. Okay, we'll do it all together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Very good. 1, 2, 3. Right. 1, 2, 3. Right. Remember the instructions. Read what you see. You all failed. Right? There are no words there. There's no law of physics that tells you have to put an H between that W and A, but you do so. Why? Because your brain has encoded the statistics co-occurring letters in English and other languages. So you're seeing the meaning of the information, not the information. Notice none of you read this. What are you dreaming? Why? Because I had you reading. That was your recent history. And this is true even at the level of seeing lightness. You'll notice you see a dark brown tile at the top and a light orange tile at the side. That is your perceptual reality. You're seeing the meaning of the data. But what's the information? That those two tiles are exactly the same. That is your physical reality. That is your perceptual reality. Nothing is changing other than the meaning according to your history. And not just your history, but the history of your culture and the history of your ancestors, as Isabel will tell us later. Okay? These two tables are the same. Agreed? Okay, the red table is simply the green table on its side. Okay? They have the exact same dimensions. Say, not only do we project our colors into the world, nothing you see in the world is colored. The color couldn't exist closer to you, which is inside your mind. Right? You're defined by that ecology. We project color into the world, but what's true for color and surface and objects is also true for other people. We project the meaning of people onto them. We never see the person. They are nothing but sources of meaningless information as far as your brain is concerned. So you perceive them according to your history of past perceptions. Right? And I want you to show you how the offense here changes the perception of the meaning of the quarterback by their behavior to the defense. Sound up. Right? You can do that once, right? So what does the history of experience gives you? It gives you assumptions, right? It gives you biases. Everything you do is nothing but a reflex arc grounded in the history of assumptions that your brain has encoded in the functional structure of your brain, right? Everything you do. It's not that some things have biases and some things don't, which is fundamental to your survival. Every time I take a step, my brain has hundreds of assumptions about the floor, about my legs, about everything. They keep you alive, but what was once useful may no longer be useful, which is why we have to be creative, which is why we have to see differently, right? But what it means is when it comes to perception, we are just like this frog. And I don't mean metaphorically like this frog, we are just like this frog. Okay, this is virtual reality for a frog. It's getting information, generating behavior that was useful. All right, it's doing quite well. Yeah. We're still like that frog, right? So if everything we do is a reflex grounded in our assumptions, how is it ever possible to step outside that history and see differently? Seems absolutely impossible. Well, if I have one aim in this talk, is that you will know less at the end than you think you know now. Why? Because everything interesting begins with a question. It begins with not knowing rather than knowing. What do questions do inside? And so much of our society is focused on answers, right? The cash is in the good question, not in the right answer. And good questions are hard. We don't even teach children how to ask a good question, right? What do questions do? If everything I do is grounded in my assumptions, all I have to do is change my assumptions, I change my perception, right? So imagine this is you. This is your current state. What's possible next is not everything. In fact, it's actually a limited set of steps that modeled here according to proximity and size, right? Fairly predictable. The space, which we call the space of possibility, is grounded in your biases. Change the biases, and you change the space of possibility. Two things that were once far apart can suddenly be right next to each other. Your brain never does big jumps. I can't go from here to the back of the room without passing through the space between. My brain is only ever making small steps. All I do is I change the space of possibility around me by changing my biases through questions. I want to show you how quickly you can change your perceptions by changing your assumptions just by motion. You'll see this spinning from left to right. That's because your brain assumes you're looking down onto the central surface. I want you to change that assumption. Imagine it differently. Imagine looking up at that central surface. Blur your eyes, look around it, blink, and suddenly you'll go in the opposite direction. Can you get to flip? Yes? How many can get to flip? If I tell you it's an IQ test? Oh yes, I can do it. Right? All you're doing is changing. You cannot see it spinning the other direction. It's an impossible perception until you change your biases. Right? Are you being creative? No. Which direction is it actually rotating, by the way? How many say left to right? Right to left? I don't care. What if I were to tell you that there's no motion on the screen at all? Nothing is moving. It's true. Glenda. Right? You're seeing a series of still images. It's an animation that are slightly different from each other. Your brain is taking that small physical difference and seeing the meaning of the change, not the change. You see the meaning of information, not the information. Right? So this idea that creativity is chaotic, messy, serendipitous, mysterious process is in fact completely wrong. There's nothing creative about creativity. Right? Creativity is only created from the outside. When you see someone putting two things that are far apart together, for them, they sit right next to each other. It's for you that they're far apart. It's because their space of possibility is different. They have different biases and assumptions from their history. Okay? So what then is the fundamental challenge to creativity? It's that we too often act with certainty. Right? We too often think we have an objective view of the world, and our view is the view. Right? If I show you anything, it's to show that you're making it all up. Okay? What's more, we could say, great, I'm going to challenge my assumptions. But the problem is, your assumptions are hidden to you. We don't actually know why we do what we do. You'll give me a reason, right? And you could pass a lie detector test. But in fact, you don't necessarily know why you're doing what you're doing. You don't know what your assumptions are. And in a longer talk, I could give you a couple of examples. Okay? And finally, you might even be able to identify your assumptions. And by the way, the best person to identify your assumptions is not you, it's someone else. Right? That's the beauty of a loving relationship, of teaching. Right? So the other point is, what if my assumptions were revealed to me? Now I have to question them. And you hate uncertainty. To not know that's a predator, it's too late. Your brain evolved to take what is uncertain and make it certain. Seasickness is a consequence of uncertainty. You go down below in a boat, your eyes are moving in register of the boat, right? And your eyes are saying, oh, we're standing still. But your inner ears are saying, no, 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 we're moving. Your brain cannot deal with that conflict and it gets ill. Why you should go up on top of the deck and watch the horizon so they move in register, right? We hate uncertainty. And one of the fundamental solutions to uncertainty you hear about in the next session, okay? So perception, what's interesting, perception is the challenge to creativity, right? But it's also the process of perception is the solution to uncertainty, right? Creativity begins with just stopping. It begins with not associating a stimulus with a meaning, to step into uncertainty. If you want to take someone to go from A to B, the first step is to take them from A to not A, right? At which point they're now in uncertainty. You now have no control over what's going to happen next, right? Fundamental to that is that space that enables you to step into uncertainty, right? So then, what makes the human mind beautiful? It might surprise you. It's that we're delusional, right? So I'm going to push you into a state of delusion. I want you to see if you can hear something interesting in this sound string. Can you hear anything interesting? Sorry? Marijuana did I hear? Of course, we're in Colorado. Right? Okay, well, let's read along. Okay, read along. Are you hearing it's fun to smoke marijuana? Yes? No? You're not sure? It's sort of a personality test maybe, right? Are you getting, for those of you who can hear, are you getting better at hearing it? Yes? Notice you're getting better at hearing something that doesn't actually exist. You're becoming delusional. You're basing your perceptions on the history of the perceptions you had before. Not what was accurate, not anything else, but what you perceived before based on the context. Okay? So what is that sound? It's simply this played backwards.
Another one busts the dust. Another one busts the dust. Ow! Another one busts the dust. Hey!
So I'll leave you with the... So I have a challenge for you. I have a challenge for you, right? So choose your delusion, right? So which of your current... So we agree that we have been wrong in the past, right? We can all agree that. But which of your current assumptions is wrong? An impossible question to answer, right? So Glenda asked me, so that's the end of that bit. Glenda asked me to speak about a couple of examples, to take 2 minutes to talk about a couple of examples about how we're employing this way of thinking, right, in the real world, to ground it. And one example is the lab of misfits. What is the lab of misfits? The lab of misfits is if you're going to understand human nature, you need to study people not in a lab. A lab is just another theater. People behave in the way they think they're supposed to. You study people in the wild, as Isabel will talk about later with bonobos. That's where true nature evolves, right? So we create experiences. We turn basically the lab into a nightclub, right? And we study human nature in the decision, in the environment in which we evolved, okay? And another example, which is now very familiar to you, is Pokemon Go. We didn't create Pokemon Go. We created the context for Pokemon Go 3 years ago. We call it Traces. And it's an augmented reality platform that enables you to have experiences just like Pokemon Go. Why do we do this? Because the way the brain makes meaning is by physically interacting in the real world with the people you care about. Okay? We keep forgetting that our brain evolved in a body, and our body in that world. We are defined by ecology. So the power for augmented reality, we had argued, is that that's where your brain makes meaning, right? And now everybody understands the significance of that through Pokemon Go. We have a similar platform we created 3 years ago, which enables you to leave messages, secret messages, music, even money, floating in the real world. And we emphasize the giving side of sharing rather than the broadcasting side of sharing. And finally, another example is education. We created a program called I Scientist, which uses science to enable young people, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, to step into uncertainty, to focus on questions rather than answers. Because science is a way of being. It's not a methodology. That's the craft of science. But science is a way of being that enables you to step into uncertainty. Okay? And as a consequence of this program, they became the youngest published scientists in the world from 8 to 10 years old and the youngest ever TED speaker. Okay? And now we're looking to create what we call the Hummingbird Institute, which is a real science institute just for the young girls from 6 to 16 years old in the most deprived areas around Chile, in Santiago, Chile. Okay? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. I hope you know much less now, but understand more.
Thank you, Beau. That's everything that Beau took hours and hours to explain to me. He distilled in a short time for you. And Beau has a new book coming out called Deviate, A Different Way of Seeing. I think we'd all look forward to reading that. Is the mic on now? Yes? So speaking of stepping into uncertainty, a young woman who's a chemist had a brilliant idea, I think, when she stepped into uncertainty, and she created something called the drinkable book. I would actually tell you what it is, but I think it's more interesting to watch this video and see what it really is and how she took a leap of faith to do this tremendously social good project. Let's listen.
$3.4 million people die each year from water-related disease. But the even bigger problem? Most of them don't even know their water is unsafe to drink in the first place. That's why Water is Life, partnering with scientists and engineers at Carnegie Mellon and the University of Virginia, set out to invent a solution that solves both of these problems. Introducing the Drinkable Book, the first ever tool that teaches safe water habits and is printed on technologically advanced filter paper capable of killing deadly waterborne diseases.
My name is Terry Dinkovich. I am a chemist. I invented a paper that purifies drinking water. After passing water through our filter, we found a reduction of greater than 99.9% in bacteria count, which is comparable to the tap water in this country.
The book uses a brand new type of paper that works like a scientific coffee filter. Each piece is coated with silver nanoparticles, which kill diseases like cholera, E. coli, and typhoid.
The orange color of the paper is a direct result of the addition of the silver nanoparticles. And at the end of the day, the most important thing, and really the hero of this whole project, is the technology behind it.
The book itself works in 3 easy steps. Simply tear out a filter, slide it into the custom filter box, and pour contaminated water through. What comes out is safe to drink. The content on each page, printed in food-grade ink, educates people about safe water habits, things that we take for granted, such as keeping trash and feces away from your water source. But the best part of the book isn't just that it purifies water or teaches proper sanitation, it's the fact that this filter paper will revolutionize water purification. It costs only pennies to produce, making it by far the cheapest option on the market, and it's extremely sustainable. Each filter is capable of giving someone up to 30 days worth of clean water, and each book is capable of providing someone with clean water for up to 4 years. To learn how you can provide a filter book for a community in need, head to waterislife.com.
Okay, Mike. We have one more video, and it's by a friend of ours, David Eagleman, an exciting young neuroscientist. No? Wrong. We're on Eagleman, the hearing vest. Let's see if we can find, yeah, we've got it. David Eagleman, he makes neuroscience seem like a lot of fun. Besides creating the incredible hearing vest, a spectacular help for deaf people at a cost of $18,000 as opposed to a cochlear implant at $40,000 a piece, he goes on to think about how he could add new senses to human beings. Let's have a look.
So my interest in my lab is sensory substitution for the deaf. And this is a project I've undertaken with a graduate student in my lab, Scott Novick, who's spearheading this for his thesis. And here's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it so that sound from the world gets converted in some way so that a deaf person can understand what is being said. And we wanted to do this, given the power and ubiquity of portable computing, we wanted to make sure that this would run on cell phones and tablets. And also, we wanted to make this a wearable, something that you could wear under your clothing. So here's the concept. So as I'm speaking, my sound is getting captured by the tablet, and then it's getting mapped onto a vest that's covered in vibratory motors, just like the motors in your cell phone. So as I'm speaking, the sound is getting translated to a pattern of vibration on the vest. Now, this is not just conceptual. This tablet is transmitting Bluetooth, and I'm wearing the vest right now. So as I'm speaking, the sound is getting translated into dynamic patterns of vibration. I'm feeling the sonic world around me. So we've been testing this with deaf people now. And it turns out that after just a little bit of time, people can start feeling, they can start understanding the language of the vest. So this is Jonathan. He's 37 years old. He has a master's degree. He was born profoundly deaf, which means that there's a part of his Umwelt that's unavailable to him. So we had Jonathan train with the vest for 4 days, 2 hours a day, and here he is on the 5th day.
You.
So Scott says a word, Jonathan feels it on the vest, and he writes it on the board.
Where?
Jonathan's able to translate this complicated pattern of vibrations into an understanding of what's being said.
Touch.
Now, he's not doing this. Jonathan's not doing this consciously because the patterns are too complicated, but his brain is starting to unlock the pattern that allows it to figure out what the data mean. And our expectation is that after wearing this for about 3 months, he will have a direct perceptual experience of hearing. In the same way that when a blind person passes a finger over Braille, the meaning comes directly off the page without any conscious intervention at all. Now, this technology has the potential to be a game changer because the only other solution for deafness is a cochlear implant, and that requires an invasive surgery. And this can be built for 40 times cheaper than a cochlear implant, which opens up this technology globally, even for the poorest countries.